of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. My name is Shari Langemark. I work as science editor for the German newspaper Die Welt and Welt am Sonntag. And today we want to discuss various kinds of topics about the Israeli and German cooperation in research. And I'm happy to welcome a couple of well-known experts on the cooperation on research. We will have a keynote lecture from Professor Helmut Schwarz right in the beginning, and afterwards Professor Hanoch Gutfreund will present a showcase on neuroscience, and then we have like a short discussion about the whole cooperation. So yeah, maybe we can just start with the keynote lectures. Late anyway. Please welcome Professor Helmut Schwarz, the president of the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation. Good.
Ja, die Organisation ist wirklich etwas sehr chaotisch. Ich hatte gefragt, ob ich meinen Vortrag in Englisch oder in Deutsch halten sollte und bekam eigentlich nie eine Antwort. Und dann hieß es, aber selbstverständlich nur in Deutsch. Und dann erfuhr ich vor ein paar Tagen, es wird alles in Englisch gemacht. Aber ich bin flexibel, aber nicht immer so flexibel. Also habe ich beschlossen, ich werde in einem einfachen Deutsch langsam zu Ihnen reden. Es soll auch eine Übersetzung geben für die, die unbedingt wissen wollen, was ich sage. Obwohl ich etwas anderes sagen werde, als in der Übersetzung steht, zum Teil zumindest, aber wie auch immer. Also im Talmud, den ich Ihnen nicht erklären muss, im Talmud, einem der bedeutendsten Schriftwerke des Judentums, heißt es, 10 Teile Weisheit gibt es in der Welt, 9 im Land Israel und einen in der restlichen Welt. Es ist wahrscheinlich auch wahr. Ja. Das sind in jedem Fall stolze Worte. Und wer möchte zu einem solchen Land und den dort lebenden Menschen keine wissenschaftlichen Beziehungen haben? Und ich freue mich und bin den Organisatoren trotz dieser wirklich miserablen Organisation dankbar, heute beim Science Lab zu Ihnen sprechen zu dürfen. Einfach aus dem Grund, weil mich über Jahrzehnte hinweg sehr enge persönliche Beziehungen und wissenschaftliche Beziehungen mit vielen Personen und Einrichtungen in diesem wunderbaren Land verbinden. Aber ich habe eine kleine Einführung, die vielleicht etwas irritierend klingen mag, weil ich zunächst Ihnen ein wenig erzählen werde über die Einrichtung, deren Präsident ich bin, die Humboldt-Stiftung. Also haben Sie ein bisschen Geduld. Es hat sehr viel mit Israel zu tun, mit den deutsch-israelischen Beziehungen, obwohl es im Moment gar nicht danach klingen wird. Aber vielleicht lernen Sie dabei auch etwas. Humboldt, Alexander, nicht Wilhelm, sein Bruder. Alexander von Humboldt, der Namenspatron unserer Stiftung, war vermutlich einer der bedeutendsten Naturforscher des 19. Jahrhunderts. Und es ist nicht vermessen, diesen Weltbürger, einen Weisen, einen mutigen Mann zu nennen, der uns lehrt, worauf man beim Aufbau von Beziehungen zwischen Menschen achten soll. Humboldt, das will ich am Anfang auch erwähnen, wuchs in Berlin auf. Doch das Berlin seiner Jugendzeit war ganz anders als heute, ein ziemlich langweiliger, provinzieller, ja spießbürgerlicher Ort. Die Stadt, obwohl damals schon die größte Stadt Deutschlands, und ihre Bewohner lieferten nicht jene Umgebung, in der sich kulturelle oder gar wissenschaftliche Ideen hätten entfalten können. Ganz seltene Ausnahmen für dieses kulturell interessierte Ambiente waren damals die Häuser alteingesessener, relativ wohlhabender deutscher Juden. Diese Bürger bildeten die Zentren des kulturellen Lebens in Berlin. Und Humboldt und sein Bruder Wilhelm verkehrten beispielsweise im Haus von Markus und Henriette Herz in der Nähe des Gendarmenmarktes. Markus Herz, ein jüdischer Arzt, hielt in seinem Privathaus Vorlesungen über Physik, über Philosophie. Es soll sogar wissenschaftliche Versuche dabei gegeben haben. Ob Damen und Herren dabei in Ohnmacht gefallen sind, wie das in München einmal passierte, als Liebig Vorlesungen hielt vor dem König, das wissen wir nicht. Aber wie wichtig diese Begegnungen für den jungen Alexander von Humboldt waren, das beschreibt Humboldts Biograf Botting sehr bildhaft. Ich zitiere: Die kleinen Gesellschaften von Hertz und von Moses Mendelssohn mit dessen Söhnen und deren emanzipierten Frauen, die Unterhaltungen über moderne Wissenschaften und fortschrittliche Literatur, erschienen Wilhelm und Alexander von Humboldt wie Oasen nach langen Wüstenmärschen. Berlin war zu der Zeit, kulturell gesprochen, wissenschaftlich gesprochen, eine Sahelzone. Bis zum Tode, bis zu seinem Tode pflegte Humboldt Beziehungen zu den einflussreichen, den hochgebildeten jüdischen Familien. Und die hierbei gesammelten Eindrücke waren wegweisend und prägend für seine extrem liberale Einstellung und seine entschiedene Haltung gegenüber dem schon damals existierenden Antisemitismus. Damals besaßen, wie Sie vermutlich wissen, Juden nur begrenzte Bürgerrechte, was er, Humboldt, mit den Worten kommentierte: Welch freche Rohheit lesen Sie unter den jetzt gesetzlichen Bestimmungen, welche Schamlosigkeit, derer wir uns ewig schämen müssen. Damit, wie auch mit seiner kompromisslosen Haltung gegenüber der Sklaverei, der Ablehnung von jeder Art von Kolonialismus, war Humboldt seiner Zeit um hunderte Jahre voraus. Er schenkt die Juden, den jüdischen Bürgern, jene Achtung, die ein altes Kulturvolk, ein Volk der Bücher, ein Volk, dessen Geschichte und Religion von allgemeinem kulturellen Interesse sind, verdient. Humboldt sprach nicht nur von der großen Rolle der Toleranz, er verkörperte sie in seinem ganzen Handeln. Bis heute ist dieser Mann großes Vorbild für viele. Humboldt starb 90-jährig in Berlin. Er war vermögend von Kindheit an. Er starb völlig verarmt, ja, man kann sagen, komplett überschuldet. Nicht, weil er gezockt hatte. Er starb verarmt, weil er im Grunde sein privates Geld verwendet hat, seine großen Forschungsreisen zu finanzieren und vor allen Dingen, um junge Menschen aus der ganzen Welt damals schon zu fördern. Er starb hoch angesehen, weltweit bewundert, geehrt für all das, was er als Wissenschaftler, als Citoyen getan hat. Und bereits ein Jahr nach seinem Tod, 1859, wurde von seinen Freunden in Paris, in London und St. Petersburg aus privaten Mitteln eine Stiftung, die nach ihm benannt war, gegründet. Eine Stiftung mit einem riesigen Privatvermögen, nach heutigem Geld mehr als 100 Millionen Euro, privat gesammelt. Dieses ganze Geld ging 1922, 1923 in der großen Inflation verloren. Die Stiftung wurde aufgelöst, sie spielte im Dritten Reich keine besonders große Rolle, wie eben alle diese Einrichtungen keine große Rolle gespielt haben. Die jetzige Stiftung wurde 1953 von der Bundesregierung gegründet und dies nur wenige Jahre nach Ende des Zweiten Weltkrieges und dem Untergang von Nazi-Deutschland. Der Zweck dieser Stiftung, und jetzt komme ich bald auch zu Israel, was höchste Zeit ist, der Zweck der Stiftung lautet: Förderung von Wissenschaft und Forschung sowie der interkulturellen Verständigung. So steht es seit 60 Jahren in unserer Satzung und danach handeln wir. Und mit dieser mutigen Neugründung streckte nach Krieg und Völkermord ein noch junges, demokratisches Deutschland den Völkern der Welt die Hand zur Versöhnung entgegen. Durch wissenschaftlichen Dialog und Austausch sollten Grenzen und nicht nur sprichwörtliche Mauern überwunden werden. Wissenschaft sollte zu einer Diplomatie des Vertrauens beitragen. Ja, Sie mögen sich mittlerweile fragen, das ist ein wirklich langer Vorspann zu einem Thema, das doch letztlich der deutsch-wissenschaftlichen Zusammenarbeit dienen und sie behandeln soll. Aber die Antwort ergibt sie aus dem Kontext dessen, was ich nun sagen werde. Denn wer hätte gedacht damals, als die Vergangenheit zwischen Deutschland und Israel so düster und so bitter vorbelastet war, damals, als nach Krieg, Vertreibung und Völkermord auch die Zukunft zwischen diesen beiden Staaten völlig ungewiss war, Wer hätte damals es gewagt, vorauszusagen, dass wir heute die deutsch-israelischen Wissenschaftsbeziehungen zu Recht eine große Erfolgsgeschichte nennen und auf sie auch ein wenig stolz sein dürfen? Wie konnte dies nur gelingen? Ja, die Antwort ist ziemlich einfach. Die Wissenschaft und die Art und Weise, wie Wissenschaftler miteinander umgehen, haben wesentlich dazu beigetragen, Vertrauen aufzubauen. Denn wissenschaftliches Arbeiten ist interaktiv. Es beruht auf einem gleichberechtigten und freien Austausch von Ideen und vielleicht die zentralste Komponente überhaupt. Vertrauen stellt die unerlässliche Voraussetzung und die Grundlage für jegliche Zusammenarbeit dar. Und aus den Beziehungen zwischen Personen entsteht vermutlich auch Vertrauen in Institutionen und schließlich in den günstigen Fällen sogar zwischen den Staaten selbst. Tatsächlich war die Wissenschaft auch Wegbereiterin und ein Chemiker, wie ich es bin, der würde hier den Begriff Katalysator verwenden, Heiratsvermittler. Die Wissenschaft war im Grunde Wegbereiterin für die Aufnahme diplomatischer Beziehungen zwischen Deutschland und Israel, die ja erst im Jahr 1965 formalisiert wurden. Doch bereits in den 50er Jahren gab es die ersten wissenschaftlichen Kontakte zwischen zunächst ganz wenigen Personen aus beiden Ländern. Und beim ersten, damals strikt geheim gehaltenen Besuch einer kleinen Delegation deutscher Wissenschaftler 1959 am Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot war neben Otto Hahn und Wolfgang Gentner auch der Biochemiker und spätere Nobellaureat für Lünen dabei, damals Direktor des Max-Planck-Instituts für Zellchemie in München und später zweiter Präsident der Humboldt-Stiftung in der Nachfolge des großen Werner Heisenbergs. Wissenschaftler waren es, die die ersten Bande knüpften, vorsichtig und tastend noch. Die Bande wurden dann gepflegt, sorgsam gepflegt, sind zunächst ganz langsam gewachsen. Und heute ist aus diesen wenigen Fäden ein dichtes, weit verzweigtes, tragfähiges Netz aus Beziehungen zwischen deutschen und israelischen Wissenschaftlern geworden, ein Netzwerk, wie es in dieser Intensität meines Wissens kein weiteres Mal zu existieren scheint. Seit nun 60 Jahren trägt neben anderen Institutionen wie beispielsweise die Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, die Max-Planck-Gesellschaft, auch die Alexander von Humboldt-Stiftung dazu bei, mithilfe ihrer Forschungsstipendiaten und ihrer Preisträger ein Netz des Vertrauens zu Deutschland zu knüpfen. Und bereits im Jahr 1958, also gerade einmal 5 Jahre nach dieser mutigen Gründung der Stiftung und immerhin 7 Jahre vor Aufnahme diplomatischer Beziehungen, traf schon die erste Humboldt-Forschungsstipendiatin aus Jerusalem in Deutschland ein, um in Frankfurt am Main 20 Monate auf dem Gebiet internationales Recht zu forschen. Was für ein mutiger Schritt und was für eine großartige Geste. Der ehemalige Generalsekretär der Stiftung, Heinrich Pfeiffer, der von 1956 bis 1994 die Geschicke der Stiftung leitete und lenkte, erzählte mir vor kurzem, mit welch gemischten Gefühlen damals viele Stipendiaten nach Deutschland reisten, beispielsweise aus Polen, einem Land, das Deutschland erst wenige Jahre zuvor überfallen, verwüstet und nahezu vernichtet hatte. Wie mögen wohl erst für die israelische Juristin ihre Ankunft oder ihr Aufenthalt in Frankfurt gewesen sein? Meine Bewunderung für diese junge Frau ist grenzenlos. Und hier, bei Personen und bei ihren persönlichen Biografien, setzt die Förderphilosophie unserer Stiftung an, die, glaube ich, vorbildlich ist. Unsere Forschungsstipendiaten und Preisträger kommen nach Deutschland, bilden hier mit ihren wissenschaftlichen Gastgeber jene Wissens- und Lerngemeinschaften, die auf Vertrauen und gegenseitiger Achtung gründen. Die wissenschaftliche Zusammenarbeit, die diese Stiftung fördert, sind auf ein besseres Verständnis Deutschlands angelegt. auf Vertrauen in das Land und in seine Menschen trotz der Geschichte, auf wechselseitiges Lernen und auf den Aufbau langfristig angelegter Beziehungen. In diesem simplen Konzept hat das Gemeinschaftsgefühl der weltweiten Humboldt-Familie seinen Ursprung. Und bei Begegnung mit Humboldtianern, wie sich unsere Geförderten selber nennen, beobachten wir oft eine spontane Vertrautheit unter und eine neugierige Offenheit füreinander von Menschen, die sich vorher nie getroffen haben. Allen Programmen der Stiftung ist gemeinsam, dass wir nach dieser Erstförderung Kontakt halten, ein Kontakt, der ein Leben lang gilt. Wir operieren nach dem einfachen Oxbridge-Prinzip once a Humboldtian, always Humboldtian. Einmal Humboldtianer, immer Humboldtianer. Und diese langfristige, nachhaltige Zusammenarbeit stellt gewissermaßen die Knotenpunkte in den Netzwerken international mobiler Forschungseliten dar. Sie und nicht die Höhe der Forschungsgelder, die wir eben vergehen. Das Netzwerk und die lebenslang existierende Zusammenarbeit macht die Stiftung weltweit einzigartig. In den 60 Jahren sind mehr als 26.000 Wissenschaftlerinnen und Wissenschaftler in 140 Ländern der Welt gefördert worden. Und dieses Netzwerk nutzen wir als Mittlerorganisation der Deutschen Auswärtigen Kultur- und Bildungspolitik für den internationalen kulturellen Dialog und den wissenschaftlichen Austausch. Es hilft mit, dass Menschen mit und nicht nur übereinander reden. Es pflegt den Dialog, unbesehen von allen ethnischen, kulturellen, religiösen, geschichtlichen oder nationalen Differenzen. Wir versuchen, die Menschen mit den Menschen zusammen zu verstehen, dass man Differenzen aushalten muss, ja, sie akzeptieren muss. Und das Auswahlkriterium für all diese 26.000, also für eine Förderung, für eine Preiserkennung, zur Erkennung, ist ganz simpel. Es zählt allein die individuelle wissenschaftliche Qualifikation, Meritokratie pur. Wir kennen keine Quoten, weder für Fächer, noch für Länder, noch für Alter, noch Geschlecht. Vermutlich sind wir ein wenig altmodisch, in jedem Fall sind wir politisch inkorrekt. Die Humboldt-Stiftung sucht allerdings weltweit die weltweite Elite der Forscher für eine Zusammenarbeit mit Deutschland und heute muss man eigentlich sagen, für Europa zu begeistern. Und deshalb fördern wir aus voller Überzeugung Personen, lassen uns nicht auf kurzfristig angelegte Projektförderung ein. Personenförderung ist nach unserer Meinung die beste aller denkbaren Unterstützungen, vielleicht sogar die beste Investition. Denn gut ausgebildete, das heißt in mehreren Kultur- und Wissenschaftssystemen beheimatete, kenntnisreiche Menschen fungieren letztlich als Multiplikatoren oder gar als Botschafter ihrer Länder. Und darüber hinaus bewirken natürlich diese Menschen auch, diese Personen, dass sie helfen, Strukturen aufzubauen. Lassen Sie mich einige aktuelle Beispiele Israel betreffend nennen. Erst vor wenigen Wochen habe ich in Frankfurt am Main die hochbegehrten Anneliese Meyer Forschungspreise, unter anderem an 2 israelische Wissenschaftlerinnen, verliehen. Der Anneliese Meyer Forschungspreis ist einer der höchst dotierten Preise, 250.000 € für Spitzenkräfte aus den Geist- und Sozialwissenschaften. Und die Laureaten können auf einem von ihnen frei gewählten Arbeitsgebiet über einen Zeitraum von bis zu 5 Jahren mit einem von ihnen gewählten Kollegen in Deutschland zusammenarbeiten. Also ideale Randbedingungen. Und unter den diesjährigen Preisträgern war die Historikerin Michal Biran von der Hebrew University in Jerusalem, eine international renommierte Spezialistin auf dem Gebiet der Geschichte Eurasiens des 10. bis 14. Jahrhunderts. Und sie wird demnächst in Bonn mit der Universität Bonn ihre Zusammenarbeit begehen. Der zweite Anneliese-Meyer-Preis ging an Eva Ilus, eine der weltweit führenden Wissenschaftlerinnen auf dem Gebiet der Kultursoziologie und, nach Meinung der Wochenzeitschrift Die Zeit, eine der 12 einflussreichsten Intellektuellen unserer Zeit. Eva Ilus wird in Frankfurt am Adorno-Horkheimer-Institut für Sozialforschung arbeiten. Von diesen beiden Frauen, und das ist gar nicht das Wichtigste, wird nicht nur unser Humboldt-Netzwerk profitieren. Vor allem werden die deutsch-israelischen Wissenschaftsbeziehungen davon profitieren. Denn beide Personen, Persönlichkeiten muss man sagen, betreiben nicht nur Wissenschaft auf höchstem Niveau. Sie sind darüber hinaus beeindruckende Forscherinnen. Sie sind eben Persönlichkeiten, die den Dialog mit einer Gesellschaft nicht nur nicht scheuen, sondern ihn suchen. Dies erwähne ich nur deshalb, weil wir in der Stiftung wirklich die ganze Person im Blick haben. Wir sind kein Freund des so oft von der Politik und an anderer Stelle benutzten Begriffes, wir wollen die besten Köpfe kriegen. Nein, nein, der Kopf reicht nicht aus. Denn das unterstellt ihr, dass wir gar keine Person, sondern nur ein paar graue Zellen vor uns haben. Wir suchen die ganze Persönlichkeit. Und wir glauben ganz fest und handeln auch entsprechend danach, dass sich die Wissenschaft zwar mosaikartig aus den Beiträgen vieler Einzelner zusammensetzt, dass aber große, wirkliche Durchbrüche, nicht nur in der Wissenschaft, sondern auch in anderen Gebieten, immer der Leistung und der Leidenschaft einzelner Personen geschuldet sind. Und dabei spielt eben die Persönlichkeit eine entscheidende Rolle. Denn was wäre beispielsweise die Kunst ohne Max Ernst oder Käthe Kollwitz, die Geschichtsschreibung ohne einen Fritz Stern, die Literatur ohne einen Heine, Kafka oder Proust, Musik ohne Mendelssohn, Bartholdy, die Chemie ohne Richard Wildstätter und Fritz Haber, die Physik ohne einen Albert Einstein, James Franck, Lise Meitner, Otto Stern, Max Born und andere Heroen, Chemiker und Physiker jüdischer Herkunft, die alle im Dritten Reich, wie auch 1800 andere jüdische Wissenschaftler, von Deutschen aus Deutschland verjagt worden sind. Eine Schmach, eine Schande, eine Torheit, die in der Geschichte beispiellos ist. Personen zu fördern, musste auch Chaim Weizmann, der erste Präsident des Staates Israel und zugleich erster Präsident des nach ihm benannten weltberühmten Weizmann Institute of Science in Rehovot, im Sinn gehabt haben, wenn er behauptete, dass Intelligenz, ich zitiere, der einzige Rohstoff sei, über den wir in Israel verfügen. Und folgerichtig hatte die Wissenschaft in seinem Land konsequent gefördert. Heute weist der auf dem Globus geografisch doch kaum wahrnehmbare Zwerg Israel weltweit die höchste Wissenschaftlerdichte auf. Zudem sind israelische Wissenschaftler hervorragend international vernetzt. Ein Drittel der wissenschaftlichen Veröffentlichungen von Israelis basieren auf einer Zusammenarbeit mit Forschern außerhalb Israels. Und die Erfolgsquote israelischer Wissenschaftler bei den so begehrten, unter extrem kompetitiven Bedingungen vergebenen ESC-Grants ist fast singulär. In jedem Fall ist sie vorbildlich, auch für uns in Deutschland so verwöhnten Wissenschaftler. Seit der ersten israelischen Humboldt-Forschungsstipendiatin 1958, diese mutige Frau, die nach Frankfurt ging, kamen insgesamt 158 Stipendiaten aus Israel nach Deutschland. Und die Stiftung förderte, und das ist ein Rekord, 106 Preisträger, unter ihnen noch Nobellaureaten wie Aaron Shishanover oder Ada Yonat. Und nicht wenige junge Deutsche, Gott sei Dank, verbringen ihre Postdoktorandenzeit, diese prägende Zeit, in Israel. Außerdem veranstaltet die Stiftung wie auch andere Organisationen in Israel immer wieder regionale Fachveranstaltungen. Wir, die Stiftung, wir nennen sie unsere Humboldt-Kollegs. Sie stärken das Netzwerk, aber wichtiger ist, sie helfen, die Programme der Stiftungen und der anderen Einrichtungen, vor allem den jungen Leuten, dem Nachwuchs, dem die Zukunft gehört, vorzustellen. Ein Beispiel. Seit 2009 veranstaltet die Humboldt-Stiftung gemeinsam mit der Israel Academy of Sciences and Humanities die German-Israeli Frontiers of Humanity Symposium, eine Reihe interdisziplinärer, binationaler Fachkonferenzen, die alternierend in Israel und in Deutschland, meistens in Potsdam, stattfinden und die junge Menschen zusammenbringen. Diese Tagungen ermöglichen den Ideenaustausch über die engen Grenzen der Fachgebiete sowie der Nationalgrenzen hinweg. Erst vor wenigen Wochen im September habe ich an einem Symposium in Kibbutz Suba zum Thema Access, Knowledge and Resources teilgenommen. Es war, wie auch all die anderen früheren Veranstaltungen dieser Serie, ein Feuerwerk, ein intellektuelles Feuerwerk, ein Jungbrunnen. Hier wurden einem wirklich die Lebensbatterien von den jungen Menschen gefüllt. Meine Damen und Herren, das sind nur ganz, ganz wenige Beispiele. Ich könnte sie leicht um Dutzende ergänzen. Habe ich doch Israel seit 1977 mehr als 100 Mal besucht. Lebensbereichernd war und ist meine Zusammenarbeit mit Israelis für mich selbst geworden. Das, was ich erreicht habe, hätte ich ohne diese Zusammenarbeit niemals erreicht. Ich möchte sie nicht missen und ich kann sie nur jedem Wissenschaftler, jeder Wissenschaftlerin empfehlen. Dass die deutsch-israelischen Wissenschaftsbeziehungen insgesamt so vielfältig und immens erfolgreich sind, denken wir nur an die großen, vom BMBF geförderten Programme, wie eben Minerva, GIF oder DIP. Das ist allerdings keine Selbstverständlichkeit. Die Zusammenarbeit, der Zusammenhalt bedürfen des kontinuierlichen Bemühens auf beiden Seiten. Vertrauen muss immer wieder neu geschaffen und die Bande müssen verlässlich und nachhaltig gepflegt werden. Einen Königsweg ohne Mühe gibt es nicht. Und der ausschließliche Bezug auf die Vergangenheit, unsere gemeinsame Vergangenheit, so dunkel sie ist, reicht alleine nicht aus, die Zukunft zu gestalten. Die Humboldt-Stiftung steht für ein kosmopolitisches Verständnis von Forschung und Wissenschaft als integrierendem Element für eine Weltkultur ohne Grenzen. Für die Wissenschaft zumindest hat sich das Modell der Humboldt-Stiftung, wie der Wissenschaftsrat vor einer Woche in seinem großen Gutachten uns bescheinigt hat, bestens bewährt. Wir, die Stiftung, wir fühlen uns der Idee, manche sagen, es sei eine Utopie, des Friedens unter den Völkern und der friedlichen Entwicklung der Menschheit unter Zuhilfenahme der Wissenschaft verpflichtet. David Ben-Gurion wird der Satz zugeschrieben: Wer nicht an Wunder glaubt, der ist kein Realist. Ich ermuntere und ermutige auch Sie daher, in diesem Sinn zu träumen, um Realist zu sein. Setzen Sie sich ein für eine bessere, eine sichere Welt, auf das wir vor allem gemeinsam als Weltgemeinschaft dazu beitragen, eine verantwortungsvolle Wissenschaft, ein durch Vertrauen geprägtes Miteinander zu ermöglichen. Israel und Deutschland und ihre Beziehungen zueinander könnten als Modell und Vorbild dienen. Vielen Dank, Toda Rabba und Shalom.
Thank you very much, Professor Schwarz, for the deep insights of the foundation of the Humboldt Foundation and the Israeli-German network. Thank you. We now go on with a showcase of Professor Hanoch Gutfreund. Professor Hanoch Gutfreund is the President Emeritus of the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and he will tell us more about the neuroscience project of the Max Planck Hebrew University. Thank you.
What do I do to get it on the screen now?
Is it working?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then very good. Now, I have not been given the choice to choose the language, therefore I can speak English. And Professor Schwarz, as always, he has so eloquently described the stage of the very, very extensive Israeli-German scientific collaboration that evolved and developed to a scope well beyond the vision of the pioneers that collaborated in this joint enterprise in the 50s and maybe we talk a little bit about that, how it happened, a little later when we do the panel. My task is to present to you, to show to you one example, a recent example, a great example of this collaboration. And this is the new Max Planck Center that was just established at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. It is a center that will have several groups, 3 groups from Germany, 3 groups from Israel, and here are the partners, the heroes of this collaboration. And as you can see, it was a result of a competition. That is what was decided. Idan Segev here is one of the coordinators. Actually, Idan Segev was supposed to be here and talk about it. And I know at least one person in the audience who is disappointed that he's not here, she told me. So he couldn't make it. I happen to be in Berlin. So it is a by default choice. I am here, and I will tell you a little bit about it. I was not sure what kind of audience there will be here, so initially I did prepare a scholarly presentation, but don't worry, it will be something that I hope everybody will be able to relate to, and I shall tell you a little bit about the 6 individuals whom you see here. Now, what I would like to tell you at the outset, why Jerusalem? And why this project was selected, in my view, in addition to the excellence of the researchers. You see, in Jerusalem, we now established a new Edmund and Lily Safra Center for Neuroscience. And this is an extension of a really pioneering, at the time I mean 22 years ago, venture in science, when we in Jerusalem established, maybe at that time, the first of the kind. Now every university that respects itself has something like that, and that was an interdisciplinary center for neural computation. And let me say a little bit about what this term means. You see, the brain is a biological organ, but it is very different from all other biological organs, because everything that all other organs do in this whole organism somehow is controlled and regulated by the brain. But moreover, it is the brain which controls all our cognitive functions, like learning, like memory, and that is even before I mention the feelings. Now, when one wants to understand what does it mean to remember, or what does it mean to learn, one has to develop certain models. And models have to do with kind of deductive thinking, with mathematical tools, with an attempt to formulate principles. When 22 years ago, we at the Hebrew University established our Center for Neurocomputation, it was not a straightforward move. It was highly controversial. Many of our colleagues in biology did not believe that there is room for what we call theoretical biology, that there is a possibility to do this kind of modeling and that it will lead us anywhere. At that time, 22 years ago, the first steps were made in the attempt to combine a large number of, at that time, separate disciplines like computer science, like psychology, like linguistics, physics, mathematics, to combine them together in order to be able to draw on all these academic scientific resources and make an effort to begin to look at the brain a little differently. Now, 20 years later, our institute, our center, has evolved into a worldly renowned institute. The Hebrew University, 2 years ago, convened an international review committee. Bert Sackman was one of the members. He is here. He's a Nobel laureate. He's a renowned neuroscientist. And they wrote a report about that center, a report that every university president would love to get. It says that if you do so and so a little bit more, and you invest in it, what was recommended, there is a chance that it will become one of the 5 best in the world. So this is where we are. And now this center is collaborating. This center is the host institution for this new Max Planck Center. Now, this is not the only collaboration in neuroscience and brain research with German scientists and German institutions. It's much broader than that. Recently, the European community has launched one of its most ambitious projects. It has allocated 10 billion euros for 10 years to do research on the human brain. This is called the Human Brain Project. It will have 80 institutions from Europe collaborating. We, Idan Segev, and a colleague at the Weizmann Institute, and a colleague in Lausanne, are the coordinators of all that project. Germany is represented there heavily by many groups. Let me just mention 2. One in Jülich, and the people in Jülich are assigned to produce the most powerful supercomputer that will be necessary to do the very, very, very elaborate simulations that this work will require. They will increase the speed by 3 orders of magnitude. And another group in Frankfurt is assigned to produce microchips that simulate the activity of the neural cells in the brain. So now let me tell you what will happen here. What is expected to happen here? So the mission here is the understanding how sensory processing, our senses, we have these 5 senses, how they operate when we behave, and study sensory processing in behaving animals, utilizing state-of-the-art experimental, computational, theoretical approaches, and specifically the 2 systems on which scholars in these 2 respective groups work on this fly, and I'll tell you a little bit about the visual system of the fly and how we learn about it, and about the mouse or the rat. They are the heroes of brain research, and particularly vision, somatosensation, olfaction, and audition will be examined. But all this will be also a framework to include young postdocs. Now, Chaim Sompolinsky, who was there, whom you see in the beard here, is a great neuroscientist. He is one of the pioneers who has spearheaded this effort of computational neuroscience, of theoretical neuroscience. And I may confess, you see, I am one of the founders and the initiators of that center 20 years ago. And in retrospect, maybe my greatest contribution to the field was bringing Chaim Sompolinsky from Bar-Ilan University to the Hebrew University. And 2 weeks ago, there was a very prestigious prize awarded in Israel that will be given every year for neuroscience. And Chaim Sompolinsky, with President Shimon Peres there, is at the end with Bert Sackman is at the ceremony. He is the recipient of the first IBT, Israeli Brain Technologies Prize, to be given now every year. Now, the first team, you see, the first team is the team by Idan Segev and by Borst. Now, everything that we do in our center, every experiment, every brain experiment is accompanied by a theoretical work. They work together, immediately interpreting and attempting to modeling. Now, Idan Segev over the years has become a champion of really understanding, investigating, categorizing the anatomical detailed structure of these nerve cells. There are many kinds of nerve cells. They have a very, very peculiar shapes. They exchange signals. The language of the brain are signals exchanged by these nerve cells. And there are all kinds of signals. There are all kinds of channels. There are all kinds of chemical molecules that are exchanged between these neurons. In order to understand really how this works, one has to have a handle on that. There are signals which excite other neurons to operate. There are signals which inhibit other neurons to operate. Idan has become, as I said, an international champion on this kind of work, and he has learned all this on the cortex, the brain of a mouse. Borst here is working on the brain of a fly. Now, don't underestimate brains of insects. They are very clever. They do many things, and it is a great challenge to understand how they do that. So what people have done over the years, they take a fly, they cramp it, put it in one place, and it cannot move, but it is not anesthetized, and it looks. And in front of it, you change the scenery. And you record from the brain of a fly what happens to the neurons. And that has been done for many years. Now, Borst here has refined this technique to the point where he does not look just at neurons, but he looks at parts of neurons, at regions in neurons, dendrites, these little extensions of neurons. And it is very important to understand what happens in these different parts of the neurons. And it is Idan who understands how inhibitions, how signals are divided in this geography of a single neuron. He learned it from mice. Now he is going to apply it together with Borst to understand the recordings of that from a fly, and maybe we'll have a better understanding. A fly is a good system to work on. So now I skip all these, yeah? And now I'm going to the other team, Sompolinsky and Sackman. And again, the two of them will cooperate to understand something about the cortex. Now, Bert Sackman today is the director of the Max Planck Institute of Neuroscience in Florida, and they do great work there. And one of the projects that they have studied over the years is the following. You see, you know our senses, but animals, there are kinds of senses which we do not have. All animals that have whiskers, you know these whiskers? Now the whiskers play a very important role. It is a sensory organ of mice. When a whisker touches something, it gives a signal. You should watch out. But then, just as a visual stimulus has its map in the cortex, so all these whiskers, what they send, is mapped in certain cortical structures. And Bert Sackmann, with his team over the years, had mapped it to the greatest detail you can imagine. Something like, I mean, this is one of Sackmann's, and then Chaim Sompolinsky, with his students, over the years, have investigated how a certain very well understood anatomically structure in our visual system, how it operates. These are called the columns. This has been done by a great German team, Wiesel and Hubel, who got a Nobel Prize for that, for understanding the anatomy of that. So there is a great theoretical expertise on doing that, and Chaim Sompolinsky and Sackmann now will collaborate on looking at the most detailed experimental results from that Florida center on the cortical mapping of the whisker sense of a mouse. Here you have, you see this here. Yeah. With the whiskers to understand what it does. And now I come to the third theme, and that is the theme of Mizrahi and Bonhoeffer. And let me tell you briefly, Adi Mizrahi, the youngest in that group, one of our great stars, what he knows, what he asks is the following questions. How do specific subpopulations contribute to the coding of sensory information? He looks not just at a single neuron, he looks at population of neurons. And he has a method. He has a method where he can stain a neuron or a whole population and can look at it by some very sophisticated optical methods. And Bonhoeffer is recording the changes in structure, in certain substructure in neurons in mice, not anesthetized. What Mizrahi has done until now, it was only anesthetized mice. And what is now the challenge? The challenge is, you see, he can look at a single neuron today and in 1 month and in 1 year. And he knows it is the same neuron. So he can trace changes. And the challenge is the following. Look at the mouse here and the baby that is born. Mice who are not mother mice are offended, disgusted by the smell of little mice. Once they become mothers, the same odor attracts them. So something very profound happened in their brain, in their olfactory system. In order to investigate what are the changes, you have to be able, first of all, look in great detail at the neuroanatomy, also at the structure of cortical populations, but you have to be able to look at the same thing a month or 2 months later and being sure that you look at the same thing. And it is not trivial. It's highly sophisticated. And both come together with complementary methods, with complementary expertise, with complementary know-how. So these are the 3 examples. These are the 3 groups. The 6 individuals are really stars in this kind of science. And we very much hope that this synergy, putting into the brain of our center all that input, all that know-how, all that expertise, all that motivation, and all that enthusiasm, will produce some real understanding for the benefit of all of us and mankind as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gottfreund, for a deep insight in one specific and very important science project. We now have a short break actually, for 10 minutes. So it's 4 p.m. right now.
5, he said 5.
5? Okay,
5.
just 5 minutes.
Maybe
So
2.
maybe 2. We should continue?
Why break?
Okay, so if you don't need any, then we...
As long as I'm not the first speaker now,
No.
we can continue.
So we step right into the discussion. We will discuss, like many of the various projects, research projects we have right now between Israel and Germany, and I'm happy to speak to 3 very well-known persons on this. You already heard Professor Gottfreund. And we also have Tali Rosenbaum with us, the General Director of the German-Israeli Foundation for Scientific Research and Development. Thank you for being here. And, yeah, thank you. And next to me is sitting Christoph Mühlberg. He's the Director for International Affairs of the German Research Foundation. Yeah, please. Yeah, and of course, Professor Gottfreund. Before we start, let me know that we will have some time for questions afterwards. So if you're interested in something particular, please keep that in mind, and afterwards you can put your question. I think our guests will be pretty happy if they can answer a question from somebody different than me after an hour-long discussion. So for now, you have to deal with me. And I actually would like to start with our woman here, with Tali Rosenbaum. And as director of the GF, I think you come across various kinds of projects, probably. I mean, I heard about 3,000 German and Israeli scientists have already worked together in the regular GF program, and I bet you get even more applications. So from your overview of that, how do you decide among all these requests, and what kind of projects come across you? Is there any focus of the GF? What would you say? What's your experience?
Well, the GIF, as any other foundation, is open to all science, all scientific topics, as long as they are for a peace process, and not for others. And I would say that the GIF is a bit different from other foundations, at least in Israel. I can say some, even in Germany and in Europe, is that the board of directors, the majority of the board of directors, 6 out of 8 are scientists, 3 from Germany, 3 from Israel. Currently, we have Professor Chechanover, is the Nobel Prize laureate on our board, but there were so many, and from Germany as well. And first it goes to the first steps of referees, which are chosen by the scientific advisors. Here on my right, my colleague from the DFG, he gives us the names and the researchers scientists that we incorporate in our scientific committees, and from Israel the same. And after they incorporated and evaluated as a group, it comes up to our board of directors, and I must say that all pro bono, and they work very hard for that, and for at least 2 weeks before the board, once a year, they make the decisions. Very difficult to make decisions between excellent groups, and Professor Gottfreund just mentioned some of the groups. Some of them I know because they were grantees of the GIF. And only before this panel started, I approached to my friend Christoph and I said, well, we had so many great programs lately, but unfortunately money is not enough. We must find a way to subsidize and give some more grants, because really excellent groups. And the question is, how come there are so great groups, excellent groups, outstanding ones? And I think that the two countries bring, I think you said most of the things I had in mind in your speech, Professor Schwartz, but I think that what brings to the table is the two different cultures. From one hand, the German with the very established scientists through all the years, and from the other hand, the Israeli ones, a new country, only 50 years, which is nothing compared to Germany, and with a different tradition, and they bring together something that, as I think it was Aristotle said, the phrase that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And it is the Gestalt afterwards here in Germany that took it one step further, but it is something unique. So I can speak a lot about this project, but through the years, it was thousands of scientists that the GIF brought together. And those relations, when they start early, they continue for life.
Wow. So what's the conclusion you take out of this? I mean, if you say you have like more applications.
The conclusion is more money, more groups.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good conclusion. So maybe I can ask Professor Goodfriend right now. You already worked in many research projects from various areas. So you probably see the cooperation from different angles right now. And maybe you can tell us your personal impression about what was happening during the past years, how this cooperation developed.
Yeah, let me just start at the history, prehistory. In 2015, we mark 50th anniversary of the diplomatic relations between Israel and Germany. Now, in the history of diplomacy, there is a concept that is called ping-pong diplomacy. Ping-pong diplomacy refers to that event in the early 70s when table tennis teams from the United States and from China visited each other countries. That was the first kind of encounter. And then what happened is that Mao and Zhuang and Nixon visited this country, and 7 years later, or 10 years later, there were diplomatic relations. Now we, with the German partners, replaced ping-pong diplomacy with science diplomacy. And that was a great idea, because the scientific cooperation between colleagues in Israel and in Germany started already in the mid-50s, 10 years before the diplomatic relations. And when I said that what I see now and what I have seen over the years is well beyond what anybody could have expected in those years, and I think that Helmut Schwartz referred to that. Who would have thought that that's what happened? Now, Tali talked about GIF. In 2008, we marked the 20th anniversary of GIF. On that occasion, Professor Weidenmüller, the physicist from Germany, and myself, at the event, were asked to review what happened in physics during those first 20 years. And of course, I knew, but until you sit down and look at it in retrospect, you cannot imagine how much happened. Every interesting development initiative on the forefront of physics in those days, and that has to do with all the projects that later led to nanoscience, all the initiatives that today go under the term of quantum information science, which you, people who are not scientists, maybe don't know what it is about, but once it becomes a technology, then it will change our daily life in ways that we cannot at this stage even imagine. This has to do with a kind of quantum computation term. Already then, GIF funded groups in every possible, in everything that is today at the forefront of research. So this is great. Then I'm thinking at the cooperation with DFG. And with DFG, I would say that what struck me most is that at the time when Israel, and again, Israeli science, tried to develop this kind of science diplomacy, science ping-pong diplomacy in our political region with individuals and institutions in the Palestinian Authority and in the Arab world. With the FG, we talked about these tripartite projects where there would be a DFG, a Palestinian Hebrew University, Palestinian Weizmann, and DFG as a partner. And they really contributed to this project, the Red Sea research. I remember specifically a project on urinary tract cancer, which we did with the Palestinian hospital in East Jerusalem, where you participate. And there is a whole vast range. So it is not only the science, it is also assisting us in fostering scientific relations in our so politically loaded and problematic region. So a lot has happened, and I talk too much.
No, wait. Maybe we can have like your opinion right now on this, because I mean you're like the representative of the DFG right now, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more what kind of what's the role of the DFG in this cooperation, and maybe you can also tell us why the Israeli-German cooperation is different from other international corporations you deal with.
Thank you very much. Perhaps it helps if you show my first slide. I prepared on the request of Yaron Parsi 3 or 4 slides in order to help you understanding the technicality of the matter. Following on from what Hanoch Gutfreund said, the DFG, the German Research Foundation, in fact, is a national research council. It is not an international funding organization, which is very important to keep in mind, especially in relation to what DFG does in cooperation with Israel. To follow on from what Helmut Schwarz said in the beginning, the DFG was one of the organizations that sparked German-Israeli cooperation. It was not the first one. If we want to understand the position of the DFG in this, these 3 words will suffice. Bilateral means we in fact started bilateral cooperation. We then went on to trilateral cooperation, that's what you mentioned, and we now deal with the European context. To understand German-Israeli cooperation in the political sense, it is important to keep in mind the past, Nazi Germany, the Holocaust, and the end of the Second World War. Secondly, what you mentioned, the informal beginnings of German-Israeli science cooperation as a precursor and trailblazer to more formalized political relations, especially the establishment of diplomatic relations in 1965, and the various forms of implementing German-Israeli cooperation through the various forms of independent funding schemes. Both, or all the organizations which I now mention are in that sense independent from state. The Alexander von Humboldt Foundation, indeed, the Minerva Foundation, very important, and also the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, not to speak about the Volkswagen Foundation, which of course is entirely private. The Minerva Foundation is the first example that the money for this activity was given by state. Minerva has always received its funding from the federal state. In fact, nowadays it's of course the research ministry, while we have used money from our own budget, which is not dedicated to international cooperation. Let me mention how it started. After the Minerva Foundation established relations, especially with the Weizmann Institute in the 1960s, there was an initiative to extend cooperation into the university scene. In Germany, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft is mainly responsible for university research, national funding organization for universities in Germany, but talks started around 1970s about setting up cooperation links between Israeli universities and German universities. And for this, after many talks, which I've heard about, of course not participated in, conclusions were reached to the extent that the German Research Foundation, DFG, was allowed by our funding authorities to extend cooperation projects into co-funding, a co-funding mechanism. So the recipient of a grant in Germany was allowed to pass on funding to a cooperation partner on the Israeli side. That is the beginning that DFG has done for more than 40 years now. And I will stop here for a moment because technically trilateral cooperation is no other than including Palestinian researchers into this mechanism of cross-border funding.
Oh, thank you. Maybe we can stay at this point, because as you already mentioned, this research cooperation is not only about research itself, but it also promotes international understanding. And I'm not quite sure, Professor Gutfreund, you started with that and you already also put a short note on that, but I would like to know from you, how do you think could this research cooperation promote the understanding of all the different parties? Maybe you want to start, with Rosenbaum?
Well, it's not from the chief. The chief is German-Israeli only, and no third parties are involved. However, since I was the Director General of the Ministry of Science between 2002 and 2005, I can relate to that because as far as I remember, these projects are important. But let me go to a different phase and say that the same mechanism that enabled the diplomatic relations between German and Israeli, considering the bad history that we had before, and it succeeded in Israel with such a burden on the shoulders of the two countries, for each one from the other side, may work in other countries, may work to other parties, and therefore the initiative that was taken by the German side, not by the Israeli side as far as I remember, but you can correct me because I'm not sure I am, my memory is that great in my age. But as far as I remember, the initiative that came is a fruitful one. And I know it was, there was a lot of research regarding water. Professor Gottfried, he mentioned about medicine and others, but it is about geography, about water management, and all other issues that concern the whole parties in the neighborhood, I would say. And Germany initiated it, and I remember it was a success, and it is still a success. But not yet as fruitful as the German-Israeli relations.
Yeah, but maybe you can tell us about the progress in understanding from Germans and Israeli. Maybe we can stick to that so that you explain how we have like quite a troubled history, right? So what would you say? How did this cooperation help us to get closer to each other?
Well, obviously it did. I think that the GIF, when Helmut Kanzler Kohl and Prime Minister at that time, Peres, decided about the GIF, what they had in mind, there were two pillars. One pillar was the scientists, the excellency of science and science jointly project from one hand, and from the other hand, friendship between people. And I can tell you that that's from first hand. I visited many scientists through the past 3 years that I am with the GIF, and I know that from previous times, it really works. Friendship are created and stayed for years. And what can I say more than that? It works. It did work in the past. It is still working, and the GIF, with its program, especially with the Young Scientist program, we try to reach the scientists at early stages, because we know the early stage they are, the stronger ties remains for years.
Definitely. Okay, thank you. But maybe we can, if I may ask you again, look at the Israeli and German bonds, and you already said that we grew more from that than we actually expected in the beginning. So is it a kind of role model for other corporations? What would you say if you come across other countries? What can you...
Other countries? Well, it certainly is a model, because it worked. But I'd like to add maybe another perspective.
Yeah, that would be great.
Because we had a chance in the recent years to observe the science scene globally, because globalization affects to a large extent how science is made today, and things are changing dramatically. In the last several years, we participate in Kyoto in a meeting that is called STS, Science and Technology Forum for Society, which brings together about 1,000 individuals, scientists, heads of corporations, politicians, ministers of science and education, intellectuals, writers, philosophers, from 70 countries, to talk about the challenges of mankind. And what my conclusion, my observation there is, as I said, first of all, the geography of science innovation is changing and is spreading out to a large extent. The Far East, China, Japan, you would be surprised how much in science, really at the highest level, is happening today at Saudi Arabia, when they established this King Aziz City for Science and Technology, which has centers every field. You see, you can say they have the money, but they had the money already also 10 years ago, but they are doing it now. Cooperating with all the institutions. So we have to keep that in mind. And there is one mode of scientific collaboration, which is a new mode of collaboration, which I find is taking place more and more. Until now, collaboration, what did we do? Foundations, I mean, we have GIF, we have ISF, the Israeli Science Foundation, the US Israel Foundation, we have other such things. You take group from here, you take group from here, it's virtual. They exchange students, they come to visit, and they get some money. The new mode is, and DFG is doing it now in Japan, is doing it. CNRS is doing it in the Far East. You establish a physical entity. You equip it as best as you can, and then you invite scholars to work there for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. CNRS has something like that in nano times, it was presented. And DFG has an office in Japan and is starting to do exactly something like that. And that is happening, started in Singapore. There is such an entity in Singapore where we have scholars, we are partners to that, fund it, and they stay there. Then they come back, they do not emigrate. So I think that this is a new kind of mode of cooperation between countries. I think that one day we shall be discussing something like that also, to do here or there. So I just wanted to give you a new light on things. Maybe you want to add something to that.
Please.
I'm sure,
Please.
Christoph.
Yeah, you mentioned many important ideas. To be quite clear on one thing, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, what it has done in relation to Israel is exceptional. It has never been done with any other country, and it will never be done with any other country. If we, in some cases, apply similar mechanisms in cooperation with developing countries, this has got nothing to do with our German-Israeli cooperation. Israel is not a developing country, and what we do in terms of German-Israeli cooperation is and remains unique. What we do in a more general sense is certainly a matter of a more global network of trust. We have a specific German-Israeli network of trust. We try to do that on a more global basis, not necessarily with individual countries, but on a more global basis, and that is general about a national funding organization which tries to be a player on the international scene. Can you perhaps show my second slide so that I can make that evident? I say that DFG has been active, I said that before, in German-Israeli cooperation since 1970s. We are, as an administration, as an organization, also part of a network of trust. It started with the National Council for Research and Development, which existed at the time around in the early 1970s and was replaced by the Ministry of Science and Technology. Our strong relationship is with the universities, as I said, especially the 6 leading universities in Israel and also the Weizmann Institute. But we have relations with the German-Israeli Science Foundation, and our former partner is the Israel Academy of Science and Humanities. Now, Hanoch Gutfreund mentioned the Israel Science Foundation, and that, for me, as you may know, is really the most important thing. First of all, it is our genuine partner organization because it's a project funding organization. And secondly, we are trying to set up an informal association of research councils or research funding organizations called the Global Research Council, which is maybe a bit more focused than the STS Forum, but it has particular experiences to build on. We tried to do that in Europe through an informal organization called the EuroHawks, the European Heads of Research Councils. And the meeting we had in Berlin, the second of the Global Research Council, in fact brought together representatives of funding organizations, including Hanoch Gutfreund. Very, very good joint experience. I'm really very hopeful that through the Global Research Council, we can add another element to the network of trust.
Thank you. You're saying that the Israeli-German cooperation is, you learn from that and put it into a European perspective. Am I right there, or?
Well, the unique thing is that German taxpayers' money cannot cross borders.
Yeah, that's right.
As I said before. In this case, it does. And we got permission from our funding authorities to do that. By the time, 40 years ago, this was absolutely exceptional, and it was in the sense unilateral that there is no underlying agreement. It is just our decision to be allowed to do that, and we have continued to do so for more than 40 years now.
Wow.
If I may add, this generosity created lots of fruits between these two countries. I just wanted a small remark for things that Professor Gottfried mentioned before. There is kind of a competition, I would say in brackets, between all scientists and all the world, because it's a very small global village now. Everything is open, as it was very rightly mentioned here. There are a lot of money and put in many other societies in order to bring science and scientific methods and means to different countries. However, and this is a big however, the relations and the ties between the scientific community in Israel and the scientific community in Germany is unique and still unique. And I can see it every year when only recently at October 29th, we closed our submission cycle for this year, and we had a GIF record, we call it, over 400 projects in physics. It means that at least 400 scientists from Israel in physics, which is a lot. Professor Gottfried can tell you the community of physicists in Israel are not that big, but they have. And 400 in Germany, they sat together and they set a program together. And unfortunately, money is not enough. That's the real big problem that we find each time in the recent years. But you see them sit together, and when you go afterwards and you go to those who did not get the grants for us and you ask, okay, what do you do now? And says, okay, now, since we joined forces for the GIF, we are trying to different foundation and different programs. So it is really unique. I strongly believe that without the first steps that the DFG did, and without Helmut Kohl and Shimon Peres, and without the GIF, who actually set a high standard of relations, I'm not sure that we would have sit here today and talk about the Max Planck as the institute that was described before, very interesting, by Professor Gottfried and others. We might have small relation as we have with different countries. China, India, we can say not the United States, which was more easy to the Israeli ones because of the language, no barriers. And therefore, I think that the uniqueness should remain. I think that it should be strength, even more, not because I am at the GIF now, because I strongly believe that without that, I think that the edge that the two communities, the scientific community reached, will be lost very easy because of the temptation of all the other huge money that is in other countries and spent and now invested in. So this is my point of view.
Thank you. So,
and I hope the ministers hear me. I want some more money to the GIF.
Yeah, maybe before we come to the hopes for the future of this cooperation, maybe someone of the audience has a question. Oh, great.
Good question.
Maybe we start from right to left, if you're okay with that. So please put your question. Is it working?
Hello?
Oh,
Yes.
Okay. I have a question to you as an Israeli Professor Gottfried.
I will call you. Yes, I'm listening.
I had follow your speech about the brain and what you study there. But what I missed, you are so clever human being, you don't speak about the creator. Why do you forgot? And so, like a foolish man, to think you are like God, to speak about brain without that real truth.
Well, we don't have to say it explicitly. If you believe that there is a creator, a kind of an anthropomorphic creature that really designed and created, you are entitled to that belief. Great scientists like Albert Einstein and Max Planck never referred to themselves as atheists, but still they adopted this notion that whatever is expressed in the harmony of nature, in the fact that there are rules and laws, can represent that kind of power that you refer to in anthropomorphic terms. Others like to refer to it in metamorphic terms. So that was what I can tell you.
Thank you. I think we had another question there. Yeah, please go ahead.
Hello. First of all, I'd like to ask a question to Professor Gottfried. At the Hebrew University, you provided an online course. It's called Synapses, Neurons, and the Brain. And you participated in the whole online revolution. Could you tell us what, if this could help in internationalizing everything? And my second question is, because I study computer science and I work at the Institute for Applied Neurotechnology at the Technical University here in Berlin. Are you doing anything with brain-computer interfaces? So.
Okay. Now the first question. You see, the next big thing on the web after Wikipedia, Facebook, may well be Coursera. Now, Coursera is this initiative to have courses, scientific, academic courses on the net. And it's a great initiative. And the Hebrew University signed an agreement with Coursera, and we're providing there, I think, 4 courses to start with. The first one was Idan Segev. He had 40,000 registered students in his course. And I don't exactly know how it works because there are exercise classes and he has assistants and they respond to students. We are now launching another course which will be given by a bright young historian, a short history of mankind. I don't remember the other 2 courses. So this is the first thing. Now, yes, the interfaces, what one does is not so much, I don't know what you refer to by brain-computer interface, but brain-electronic device interface, yes, because one talks, we do have a group in that structure working on bionic arms or limbs that are operated by the neural activity. Yes. So this is a great challenge. There is progress in that.
Okay, please.
May I just speak like that?
Of course, yeah.
Right. It's actually for you, Mr. Muga. So you stated that there's a very unique attitude and problem within the DFG to basically towards Israel, the cooperation with Israel, which is a special mandate. And I guess it stemmed from the historical background and from the feeling that Germans want to encourage Israel. I think it did bear very excellent fruits. The question is that a mandate that is in danger of coming to an end? Because at some point, new German generation is going to say, oh, okay, we did enough. Israel is definitely not a developing country. Well, let's put it to the European international committees. Let them pay it, and we're part of a European community. It's no longer our personal business. Do you think this might happen, or do you think this is going to remain, at least for the next, I don't know, decades, which you can vision, still going to be a unique German-Israeli relationship in this respect?
Maybe you can show my second slide. That helps in my answer, because you address point number 1, bilateral funding in projects within the single grant scheme. That is what I refer to. That was established in 1973. This has been an informal funding opportunity because, you know, as I said, this taxpayers' money given for institutions in Germany is actually used to fund cooperation with external partners in Israel. So we have never officially announced it, and since we have a website, we have never mentioned it on the website. We have applied this occasionally also in other funding instruments. So it's not just the single grant scheme with bilateral means 2 people, 1 Israeli, 1 German, but also in coordinated funding instruments which we have. I've thought about it in terms of how can we do something which we do not declare? What is the rationale behind an activity which you at the same time hide from the public or the researchers who would like to know about it? I've gone the following way. Most of the Israeli universities use that information on their internal websites and either speak to me directly or speak via the researchers to me in order to get that information. I've so far not come any further, but I'm reasonably confident that we will keep that funding opportunity, maybe in a somewhat transformed way. I'm working on it. More I cannot say. The trilateral question you could ask, we have done this trilateral funding, which is much more voluminous. I mentioned 74 cases, but this is an amount of €1,000,000 which I cannot mention here. It is quite enormous. Something between 55 and 60 million. We started funding trilateral projects in 1995, which is soon almost 20 years ago. The DFG has never had a program of such length and substance of funding, and the question is whether we can go on with this. Also, this type of funding, the trilateral program, has suffered several times from severe political difficulties, which we have overcome more or less because we are an informal organization not dealing at the political level. So I cannot give you, if you ask me that question, I cannot confirm that we will be able to continue trilateral cooperation, especially if the obstacles become too strong. But personally, I hope that we can continue this as well. The third category, which I just mentioned, because there may be researchers in the room who would like to know about it, the program of German-Israeli cooperation is something which we run, but not from our own funds. It was inaugurated by the Research Ministry 15 years ago with our assistance, and the ministry passed that program on to us because we did basically the work for it, and we have, if you agree, special expertise to run an excellence program. This is a program of excellence, and for 5 years, and a rather high amount of funding for excellent German-Israeli cooperation projects. So these are our main funding opportunities in German-Israeli cooperation. As I say, they are unique, all three of them. And the prospects of us continuing them are, as I see it, actually very good.
Thank you. I think I saw another question. I'm just thinking, with Israel, yeah, she was first, I think, and then after, maybe.
Well, this is actually talking about funding. I'm amazed that we're not talking about Horizon 2020 so far, although it is a European initiative and not a German one. Actually, this is a question to all. This would be a question to all three of you. How is your position towards the Horizon 2020 European Union program? Basically saying that they would not subsidize activities of universities or whomsoever who are active in the West Bank, and then the Israeli government's reaction, if I understood it right, to say we are not participating in this program. And I know, I've been to Israel last week, there are talks between the European Union and Israel how to come out of this. But anyway, what is your position towards Horizon 2020, which might change a lot talking about European money?
Okay, I will be first. Luckily, the GIF is not part of this discussion because it's not a European program. It's between Germany and Israel. And if I may say that the program was set 30 years ago, over 30 years ago, and there is no question there. Although the ground rules was set then and are not changing. So I see no part of the discussion. Things continue as usual, as normal, as it was before the question was raised. So luckily, I'm not in that political question. So I escaped.
Do you want to add something?
This is a political issue.
Yeah.
I could take Tali's position.
Mm-hmm.
I am emeritus, so so nothing affects me. But I will not. No. But I am a very interested observer. I cannot imagine Israel not participating in Horizon 2020. The internal, and I don't know how that will finally, the formulation of the terms that were posed by the European community, how that will be finally formalized. But it is not only the money. It is a work of generations of scientists developing and establishing exactly what, among scientists, what Christoph refers to as the trust, the international trust. This is one arena on which until now, one talks a lot about delegitimization, political attitudes. When I go to the Global Research Council or I participate at the STS Forum, and there are certain meetings where they sit us in alphabetic order, so you know who is next to Israel. That's Iran. So he sits next to me, and we are friends. So and we are welcome on these arenas. I feel good on all these. I cannot imagine that, I don't know, governments do all kinds of stupid things, including mine. But I cannot imagine that Israel will not be part of that. And that's all I care to say now.
Thank you.
If I may direct one personal remark, it was science that paved the way for the diplomatic relations between the two countries, as was mentioned before by Professor Schwartz, and I'm very sorry that the science was caught in a diplomatic issue. I think it should have been excluded, and I'm sorry for that.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we come to your question now.
My question was actually exactly the same. Yeah, what about Horizon 2020? Many people who are involved in European research are really worried about that issue, especially when it comes to planned cooperation with Israel. Yeah, and my intention would be, of what I'm saying now, is to encourage you also, who are somehow involved in the research management or science management, to encourage also the politicians, yeah, to not make any mistakes. I think it's a really important issue. And the problem is not the Arab or the Israeli scientists. Yeah. In my lab or in my institute, there's, for instance, just now an Iraqi PhD student who desperately want to make contact with Israelis because about a different, very specific method he's working on, and he would like to have an exchange. The problem are evil politicians like Catherine Ashton, who are really playing with the fire. Yeah? And I think this is a really important issue. And if it really comes to if really Israel removes from Horizon 2020, I would encourage the German-Israeli cooperation, yeah, to find ways to increase maybe the budget, yeah, as you said also, it's the point, yeah, to somehow still enable the cooperation of scientists, yeah, and let not them be victims of the politics.
As your question did go in the very same direction, I'm not sure if there's anything
one
to
remark,
add.
one just remark. You see, this is the problem is that was raised as an issue. Nobody knows, or people do not know, that BSF, with the Binational Science Foundation with the US, we always had this hidden understanding that none of the money is spent beyond what we call the green line. That is part of BSF understanding, but it was not written anywhere. It was not... I
see. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, maybe I can add basically what I give on my slide. I want to emphasize that an important event was the association of Israel to the framework program in the mid-90s. That was supported by what I mentioned as Eurohawks, the European heads of research council, for which I worked at the time, because they thought that Israel would be a strong partner and participant in the framework program. And the interesting thing was, in the beginning, Israel paid a high price for a success which was below the investment, and some argued in favor of dropping out. Israel did not drop out and then came on a success curve, which is very impressively demonstrated by the European Research Council. I give you the figures here. Israel has had 76 starting grants and 133 advanced grants from an organization which was founded in 2007. And if you look into the list of successful institutions, you find 4 Israeli among the top 20. I think this is fantastic. It is expressed in about 600 million euros, so an important amount of money which cannot be substituted by anything. And I can only join the hope that Israel will continue its participation in the framework program, so in Horizon 2020, and follow this success line.
Okay, thank you. So maybe one last question. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Dian. I'm doing my graduate research on the international law at the Vrije University. What I can see from the discussion is, well, it's very important issues, for example, especially about the roles, the key roles of the research in improving the diplomatic relation between the German and Israel. I would like to propose two arguments. First, the science is the second-track diplomacy for the German and Israel in the long run. And the second one, we are told by as a Wissenschaftler or as a scientist, we have also responsibilities to contribute to the society, not only purely on the development of science as we're doing in the laboratory, but also we have to contribute to the society, to the developments of the German and Israeli cooperations at large. That's what I would like to say to the panelists, and thank you for the discussion.
Okay. Great. Nothing to add. Thank you. So if there aren't any more questions, unfortunately, I have to say we won't have any conclusion from Professor Herbert Jeckler. He can't come today, so but we could probably have like a short conclusion in our panel. So I wanted to ask our panelists if they could like put into one sentence what their hopes are for the future of this cooperation. Maybe we start with you.
I think I have a very, very short sentence. I already said that, and I think this summarizes the whole relations between Germany and Israel, which are extremely fruitful, and the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and let's not forget it. That's it.
Thank you.
I would like to say that in speaking on behalf of German-Israeli cooperation within an organization which is not international but national, you need a number of people who are dedicated to this form of cooperation. I've had a number of colleagues in the DFG, I must say, who have supported and helped me in this. I couldn't have done this on my own. I have had exceptional presidents. I mean, this trilateral cooperation wouldn't exist without a president called Wolfgang Frühwald, who Hanoch Gutfreund you know very well. You need dedication, and you need also the kind of determination to do something which is unique, which is exceptional, which is not a model for anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. And
well, since I concur with my colleagues on the panel, I just want to add one short remark, and that is that this cooperation, the German cooperation, is even broader than you think, and that was covered here. And let me just mention that in the year 2015, we all talk about the 50th anniversary of the diplomatic relations Israel-Germany, but for me, a more important anniversary in 2015 is the 100th anniversary of the general theory of relativity by Albert Einstein. So we shall have another Einstein Jahr, like we had here in 2005. Already now, we are cooperating with the Max Planck Institute, with the Free University, and with other partners to produce cultural, scientific, educational events connected to this, for this occasion that will happen simultaneously in Jerusalem, Berlin. By Jerusalem and Berlin, I mean Israel, Germany. So this is, I am giving you an alert. Watch out, something great will happen. Thank you.
thank you. you.